The winning blueprint presents.
In the lab room.
Welcome back in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on this Thursday. We're back in the lab room and again going over our two-a-days and these lab reports and experiments for all 32 teams in the league. And we are winding it down. We have 6 teams remaining, 2 more left in the NFC West, as we will go over the Seattle Seahawks and the St. Louis Rams today in that order. And, it's coming down the stretch of the preseason as well. And tonight, there's going to be a lot of preseason action to kick off the week. And again, it's the 3rd week of the preseason. So you need to be watching these games closely to see who's playing where. And then you need to start drawing inferences as to why they're playing. Who's making the team? Who's not in the game? That should be alarming to you. That should send off red flags. If this person has been talked about as somebody that possibly could make the team, and the team thought high of them, they will be in the 3rd preseason game. They would get in the game. And so if they're absent and they're not a healthy or they're not a scratch because of injury or some other reason, if they're active and they're not getting in the game, that is a big indication as to whether the team is really going to keep this player or are they just going to continue to play them. Or, and this is an interesting twist, teams like to stash and hide players from the other teams around the league, because you got to remember at the end of the preseason, when the cuts are made, other teams who don't have as much talent go fishing for talent around the league. And so they go back and watch preseason film and they have their scouts look and see who's an interesting prospect that they can bring onto either their active roster or to put onto their practice squad. And so some teams like to hide and stash players. And so you can't really see them and see what they can do. You've seen it in practice. You know what these players are about. And so you don't want the rest of the league to find out. And so you stop playing them, don't put them on the field so their talents aren't showcased. And then you are able to stash them onto your practice squad so that for later usage, you figure if you can groom this guy into the player that you think they can be from what you've seen in practice, and then you can bring him up to your active roster at some point, either in the season or down the road. So it's interesting. Those are the only 2 things that can come of it. If you've got a 3rd-year guy on your team and he's not playing in that 3rd preseason game, they're not trying to stash this guy on the roster. He's probably not going to make the team this year. And so keep your eye on these 3rd preseason games. But I digress, and I move on to the Seattle Seahawks and their lab report. And the NFC West is starting to take form, take shape. And the Seattle Seahawks are a team out west that when playing on and clicking on all cylinders, they're a scary football team. And Pete Carroll has come in as their head coach, and he's brought with him, as only Pete Carroll can, he's brought a sense of exuberance and youth and rah-rah that you get a lot of times at the college ranks. He's brought that with him to the NFL and to the Seattle Seahawks franchise. And he's got these guys motivated and ready to play. And so this is a tough team to play, especially when you have to go out to Seattle. And so that leads us to our first strength. And that CenturyLink Field, formerly known as Quest Field, for the Seattle Seahawks, their home stadium, that's an advantage. That's a strength for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, they weren't overly dominant at home in the 2011 season. They were 4-4, but in seasons past, they've been a hard team to beat out in Seattle. And I don't know about you, but for me, Seattle has always had this dreary, sleepy type of feel. It seems like it's always raining, like it rains every single day in Seattle. And when I'm watching it on TV, you just get a feel like your players are being lulled to sleep. And it's just a hard place to go and play. And they talk about the 12th man and the noise that they generate. That noise is manufactured noise, I believe, and I've heard. And I refuse to believe that those fans, and it's only 66,000 crammed into that stadium. I can't believe that they're able to get that loud. They talk about the metal benches in the stadium and that being able to echo noise and make it even louder than what it is. I hear what you're saying, but you're generating noise through the loudspeaker. You're pumping in artificial noise, and you're making it hard for teams to hear the snap count. Since 2005, Quest Field / CenturyLink Field has generated the most false start penalties from the opposing team, 111 to be exact. And so it's a strength for Seattle. It's hard. The wind up there is a little different. It's tricky. If you don't play there all the time, hard for you to gauge just where the wind is coming from and how to adjust. It's a home field advantage. It's a tough place to play. That's a strength for the Seattle Seahawks. You look at another strength, and this one came out of nowhere. It's the Seattle Seahawks secondary. Their secondary, they played ball last year. And what you have to look at is 3 out of the 4 players in that secondary, these players being safety Earl Thomas, safety Cam Chancellor, cornerback Richard Sherman, and the other cornerback Brandon Browner. These 4 players, they really burst onto the scene last year, especially the corners Richard Sherman and Brandon Browner. These were guys who were just fighting for a roster spot a year ago. Now they're Pro Bowlers, and they're looking to cement their place in the NFL as elite corners. And these are big. This secondary is humongous. They're huge. Each of these players in the secondary, 3 out of the 4 players, I should say, are 6'3" or better. You look at Cam Chancellor, he's 6'3". You look at Richard Sherman, he's 6'3". You look at Brandon Browner, he's 6'4". We don't see the likes of big corners in the NFL anymore. Back in the day, big corners were a dime a dozen. They don't make big corners that can move and make plays on the football and keep up with these small, shifty receivers anymore. And so we haven't seen these type of size corners since the days of Mike Haynes or Albert Lewis. And again, they don't make them like this anymore. And so the Seahawks have a great advantage with these big corners and their safeties as well. Earl Thomas being the only one not over 6'3", and he was a Pro Bowler last year. He might be the best of all the guys in the secondary. So they have players back there. And with these new breed of receivers that are coming along, your Julio Joneses and your Calvin Johnsons, and these 6'4", 6'5" guys who are just physical specimens who run 4.4, 4.3 40s and are 6'4", 6'5", having a corner to combat that can run and are as, just as tall, if not taller than a lot of these receivers, that's a great attribute. That's a great strength to have. And so if you're the Seattle Seahawks, you feel good about having these big, tall corners, because the biggest advantage that you get from having a tall receiver is the fact that these small corners can't jump with them. They are at a physical disadvantage, because if you have a 6'5" receiver like Megatron out there, and you throw a jump ball to him, you got to think that a 5'10", 5'11" corner has absolutely no shot at doing anything on that play. And so when you get a 6'3", 6'4" corner, they're right there with Calvin Johnson. Now, they might not be able to jump as high, but they can disrupt that pass much better than a 5'10" corner. And so with that being said, that is definitely a strength for the Seattle Seahawks. That secondary is coming along, and they're all young, and they're going to all have a chance to grow together if the Seahawks can keep that nucleus together. They got a lot of years ahead of them, so that's definitely a strength for the Seahawks. Another strength for the Seahawks is getting turnovers, and more specifically, getting interceptions. The Seahawks, and again, this is tied into the last strength that we just talked about, this secondary. The Seahawks, they got 22 interceptions last year. And look, that was tied for fourth in the NFL. They were busy in that secondary making plays on the ball. And see, the beauty of what they do is when they get interceptions, they're not satisfied with just getting an interception, getting a turnover, and putting the offense in a better position to score. And you got to love teams who take full advantage of interceptions or fumble recoveries. They're looking to score. They're looking to take it to the house. They did that 4 times last year. And that tied them for second in the league. And so anytime you can take a turnover and cash it in for immediate points, that's definitely a plus for your football team, and it's definitely a strength for the Seattle Seahawks moving forward. They want to look to continue that trend in 2012. It's not an easy thing to do because it's one thing to get a turnover in this league, but it's a totally different thing to take that turnover and get immediate dividends paid off of it in the form of a defensive touchdown. So, many teams try. A lot of teams fail to do that, but the Seahawks were great at it in 2011. All right, moving on to the Seahawks' weaknesses. And as good as the defense was, they were ranked 9th. I don't think people realize, just how solid and good this Seattle Seahawks defense were. They kept the Seattle Seahawks in a lot of ball games, that defense did. And so, and as solid as they were, the offense was at the opposite end of the spectrum. They were terrible last year, and the defense really held this Seattle Seahawks football team up and gave them chances to win the game. The offense was ranked 28th overall last year in total offense, and so, having a running back like Marshawn Lynch is usually a great asset to have. And Marshawn Lynch, a.k.a. Beast Mode, was a great addition to this Seattle Seahawks offense a couple years ago. And he's starting to prove dividends for them. But he didn't have any help. He didn't have any help in the rushing attack. He went for over 1,200 yards. And so he had a great season, especially by his standards. That's a big season for him. And he didn't have any help. He came out of the game and you were left with Leon Washington in the game. And that wasn't enough. Leon Washington is a nice piece on third downs, a nice guy in the return game. But he's not someone you want to hand the ball off to in between the tackles. And so they looked to address that. And they did in the draft with the running back out of Mississippi State, out of Utah State, Robert Turbin. But it wasn't just the running game. The running game was ranked 21st, but the passing game was even worse. The passing game was non-existent at times last year. And anytime you have fluctuation at the quarterback position, any kind of confusion or uncertainty at the quarterback position, you're going to get that sort of production, that sort of skittish production out of your quarterback position and out of your offense. And it wasn't just the quarterbacks, though. The offensive line had a lot to do with the struggles of the offense, primarily in the passing game. The offensive line gave up 50 sacks last year. And again, way too many. That was good. That was good for 4th worst in the league last year. You can't do that as an offensive line. You can't surrender 50 sacks in a season and not expect your offense, primarily your passing game, to suffer. And it did. And so that offensive line has to be better. And again, that quarterback situation isn't the most ideal in Seattle. But if the offensive line can't protect, it doesn't matter who you have behind center. It doesn't matter if it's Joe Montana, Tom Brady, John Elway, Dan Marino. It doesn't matter. You're not going to get production out of the quarterback position if they don't have time to survey the field, go through their progressions, and find an open receiver. And the Seattle Seahawks offensive line didn't provide that in the 2011 season. They have to be better as a whole offense, and especially the offensive line, if they're going to fulfill any kind of goal of making the playoffs in 2012. You move on to camp battles, and the Seattle Seahawks camp, their training camp this year, is littered with camp battles. And this is typical of a Pete Carroll team. Any team coached by Pete Carroll is going to have a lot of competition. And coaches always preach competition and how it elevates the play of a lot of the players. But Pete Carroll preaches it, and he actually practices what he preaches. And so when dealing with Pete Carroll, you're going to have a lot of battles going on for positions, because Pete Carroll is always looking to upgrade talent on his team, and he's not afraid to sit someone down who thought their spot was safe, who thought their position was locked up, and get them out of there and get someone who is performing better in. And so you start along that offensive line. Anytime you're dealing with Pete Carroll, there's always a wild card involved. You don't know who the wild card is going to be. You don't know where they're going to come from. But there's going to be a wild card involved. And it's no different this year in training camp. The left guard position is the first one that comes to mind. They have a left guard by the name of John Moffitt, who started for the Seahawks last year. And he did an adequate job. He's a second-year man, so last year he was a rookie. And he came in. He had his ups and downs, as a rookie normally does. And so he struggled from time to time. And so he had a good season, but good is not great. And so Pete Carroll is looking to see if he can upgrade. Again, it's still Moffitt's job to lose, but he's looking to upgrade that left guard position. So he brought in a division rivals left guard, Deuce Latui, a free agent acquisition from the Arizona Cardinals, to come in. And you would think that the battle would be between these two. Well, Moffitt went down with an elbow injury and had to have surgery, and he was going to miss a little bit of time. And so the Seahawks drafted a 7th round defensive end, and they took this defensive end, and surely enough, he's a big guy, 6'5", 298. His name is J.R. Sweezy. And they took him and they converted him, a guy who's never played offensive line a day in his life, and converted him to a guard. And he's played well. So well, in fact, he started the first 2 preseason games for the Seattle Seahawks. Amazing. Who does that? Who takes a defensive end, a college defensive end, who's never played the offensive line position a day in his life, converts him, and then sticks him in as a starter with the first team offense in the preseason? Amazing. And the fact that he's actually performed well has people thinking that he might actually be the starter come week 1. Highly unlikely, of course. But here's your wild card. J.R. Sweezy, battling for the left guard starting position with John Moffitt and Deuce Latui. Who would have thought it? You move on. And the wide receivers in Seattle were left a lot to be desired last year. Their leading receiver last year was Doug Baldwin with a little bit over 700 yards receiving. And so you got to feel like, if you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, we need an upgrade at receiver. You know, they went out and they had got Sidney Rice. He's been hurt. He's been marred by injuries since he's got to Seattle, so they've really never been able to see what he could do. And so they've really had a shortage of receivers. They don't have a lot of receiving power out there. They don't scare anybody with the receivers that they put on the field. So what they did in the offseason was they brought in some veterans. They brought in Braylon Edwards. They brought in Terrell Owens. They threw them in the mix and said, hey, let's see what you guys got left in the tank. Look, I've always been a big proponent of Braylon Edwards. I think when healthy, when mentally engaged, Braylon Edwards is a top flight receiver in this league. He has the size, he has the speed, he can catch the football. And every now and again, when he's not mentally engaged in the game, he will drop passes on you. He has no problem doing that. But when he is mentally, and right now, he has no choice but to be mentally engaged. This is it for him. If Pete Carroll wasn't such a willing participant to give guys a second and third, fourth opportunity, they probably wouldn't have got another chance in this league. I mean, a lot of teams aren't fishing for 30-something-year-old receivers who are probably past their prime to give them, people aren't banging down their doors trying to give them second and third opportunities. And so they got an opportunity here that they probably won't see again if they don't take advantage of it. And Braylon Edwards has done so thus far. He's come in, he's made plays. I watched the game against Tennessee in the preseason. He went up and made a play for Russell Wilson and caught a touchdown pass. And that's what Braylon Edwards can do. Like I said, I love Braylon Edwards. He's got the ability to jump like nobody else in this league. He can get up. When he is engaged mentally, his physical attributes, when he can stay healthy, are second to none in this league. He can get it done. And I will vouch for Braylon Edwards and tell you that, look, if you get some good Braylon, you've got a top flight receiver in this league. Now, T.O., on the other hand, I think his best days are behind him. He's not a consistent receiver anymore. He doesn't catch the football as much as you would like. And he's skating on thin ice. He had a couple of drops in his first preseason game with them, and this next preseason game is going to be telling. If he doesn't come out and show well and Braylon makes a few plays, that's it for T.O. And if he's cut by the Seahawks, that's going to be the end of his Hall of Fame career. Yes, T.O. is a Hall of Famer. Will he get in first ballot? Probably not, because he pissed a lot of people off during the course of his career. But he needs to be a Hall of Famer. His numbers bear that out, and they scream Hall of Fame receiver. He's going to get in, but if he doesn't make the Seattle Seahawks roster, which I don't see happening at this point, that's it for him. That's going to probably be a career for him. So Pete Carroll has come in and he's got people vying for spots. You have to work for you, because I really think Braylon Edwards could start for the Seattle Seahawks. They don't have receivers that scare you. I feel like Braylon Edwards is an upgrade from the guys that they could trot out there. Your Ben Adamabo, or all these other guys that they have on that roster. Even Golden Tate. I feel like Golden Tate probably better serve in a slot. So I really feel good about Braylon Edwards making this roster and actually being a key contributor for the Seahawks. And that's definitely a camp battle worth definitely keeping an eye on. And you move on, and the biggest battle for the Seahawks is without a doubt the quarterback position. And starting off in the offseason, the prevailing thought was Tavares Jackson is the starter. They went out, and I always tell you, follow the paper trail. Well, the paper trail in this case, it led straight to Matt Flynn, the offseason acquisition from Green Bay that they made. They went out, they paid him starters money, and I assume, okay, Tavares, you're now in a backup capacity fighting to try to start. This job is no longer yours. It's now Matt Flynn's to lose. And so that was the prevailing thought. Everybody thought that this battle was going to be between Tavares Jackson and Matt Flynn. Well, Pete Carroll, always with a wild card, they go and they draft third-round selection quarterback Russell Wilson out of Wisconsin. What do? They quietly work with him, devise a plan to phase Tavares Jackson out. All of a sudden, Tavares is not getting any snaps and no reps. He's not seeing the field in the preseason games. Russell Wilson is. Flynn is running with the ones. Wilson is impressing, running with the twos, running with the threes. And next thing you know, Russell Wilson is getting the start at quarterback in the third preseason game against the Chiefs this week. If he shows well, who knows what Pete Carroll's going to do? They might start this man. What's going on right now is Pete is just throwing together battles left and right, and he's throwing in these wild cards, and you don't see it coming. And I'm telling you what, if you're not prepared, you will lose your position. You lose your job. And right now, Matt Flynn is in danger of losing his starting quarterback position, and he never had it to lose, but it was his job to basically put a stranglehold on because they had paid him the money. The money said that this was his job to lose. And so he hasn't come out and been overly impressive. T.O. dropped the touchdown, a would-be touchdown pass last preseason game. And so those don't help your stats. Those don't help your performance. But he hasn't wowed the Seattle Seahawks coaching staff with his play in the preseason. And Russell Wilson has, and this is why he's starting the third preseason game. And I'll tell you what, if he comes out and impresses, you talk to anybody, about Russell Wilson, and they have nothing but good things to say about him. Outside of his height, there's not a lot of deficiencies in his game. And so if he comes out and shows well against the Kansas City Chiefs, it's going to be pretty hard for Pete Carroll and that coaching staff not to start Russell Wilson. And that's going to move us on to the rookie watch. And the Seahawks looked to shore up deficiencies, and this is what you want to do in the draft, especially for a team that's a fringe playoff team. They just missed the playoffs last year on the outside looking in. And so you want to upgrade your team by making selections in the draft that help win now. And that's what the Seahawks look to do. With their first selection, they took Bruce Irvin, the defensive end out of West Virginia. This was a controversial pick for a lot of people because Bruce Irvin, in a lot of people's mind, was not a first-round selection. He has the talent to get to the quarterback. Nobody's disputing that. But that's all he does. He's not someone that's going to play the run. He's a specialist. He's not someone that is going to give you a lot of value in any other facet, being special teams or what may have you. He's a guy that's going to come in and rush the quarterback. And so people thought that was a little high to invest a pick in someone that's only going to come after the quarterback who can't play the run, who's not a three-down defensive end. And he has some issues with, work ethic and things of that nature at West Virginia. So, and off the field things. So people were kind of skeptical about the pick. But again, this is Pete Carroll we're talking about. Throw that stuff out of the window when you're talking about Pete Carroll. He's going to do his job and his best to get the best out of any given player that's on the Seattle Seahawks roster. And so Pete Carroll will throw that stuff to the side and throw that caution to the wind and take a player. And that's what you have to do in the NFL. You got to be able to take risks for talented players and make them work for you. And Pete Carroll does that quite often, as you can see with Braylon Edwards and Terrell Owens being in camp for them right now. We move on to their second selection. Their second round pick was the linebacker Bobby Wagner out of Utah State. And he's a tackling machine, Bobby Wagner is. And so he's going to come in. They needed a middle linebacker desperately. They haven't had a good middle linebacker since Lopo Tutupu left Seattle a few years ago with all his nagging injuries and his plays falling off. They haven't had a middle linebacker since Lopo Tutupu manned up the middle for them when they were a good football team vying for Super Bowl appearances in the mid-2000s. So they desperately need Bobby Wagner to come in and shake off any kind of rookie jitters he may have and step in and play from day one. They need a middle linebacker right now. And so Bobby Wagner was drafted with the hopes of him being able to come in and fill that void immediately. And look for Bobby Wagner to do so. He's got the talent to do it. And like I said, this guy's a tackling machine. He tackles anything near him, and he can get the job done for the Seahawks if they coach him up correctly and, they simplify his duties and get him in there and get him ready to play football. Their third round selection, we spoke to him already. Quarterback Russell Wilson out of Wisconsin. Again, Russell Wilson is a quarterback that, if not for his size, he would have probably been a first round selection, and a high one at that. He might have been in the discussion as one of the top quarterbacks being selected in the draft. That's how highly people think of this guy. Only deficiency he has is that he's a 5'10 quarterback. 5'10 quarterbacks generally don't work in the National Football League. But his skill set, his leadership, his mindset is totally different than your average run-of-the-mill 5'11", 5'10 quarterback. He's a different species. And that's why people love and are endeared to Russell Wilson. And look out for this guy because, again, if he performs well against the Chiefs in this preseason game, he's probably going to get the starting job. And that is saying a lot, thinking that Matt Flynn got all that money to be the starter, thinking that Tavares Jackson was the starter last year and was coming back with another year under his belt. It was hard to fathom Russell Wilson getting any snaps in camp, let alone starting the third preseason game with a chance to start possibly being on the line. Amazing. Moving on. But really, when you think about it, with Pete Carroll, it's not that far out of the realm of possibility. Moving on, 2 fourth-round selections for the Seahawks. Running back Robert Turbin out of Utah State and defensive tackle Jay Howard out of Tennessee, or Florida, excuse me. These are 2 picks that, again, are looking to provide depth along the Seattle Seahawks front line. They have a starting running back. He's beast mode. Okay, so Turbin is not coming in looking to start right away. Again, beast mode, Marshawn Lynch is going to be suspended most likely for his DUI over the offseason. And with that being said, they're going to need someone to step in. I told you last year it was a problem when Marshawn Lynch was not in the game. They didn't have a viable running back, a backup to come in and spell him and still be productive. And so Turbin will be that guy that can be a productive backup running back and in a pinch can start for you and get you quality starts and yards and get it done on the ground. I actually liked Robert Turbin so much coming out of Utah State. I wanted the Redskins to draft him. I was a little disappointed that we did not draft him. But he's come in, he's looked solid in this preseason, and I think he's going to play a lot for the Seattle Seahawks, especially with the suspension looming large over Marshawn Lynch's head. And it's only going to be 2, maybe a 1-game suspension to start out the season. But again, with Lynch and his off-field issues, it could be 4 games. I think it's just going to be 2, maybe 1 game. And someone's going to have to start for those games. Whatever the length is, that guy's going to be Robert Turbin, and he's going to step in and do a good job. Jay Howard, on the other hand, is a defensive tackle, a little undersized at the University of Florida. They're looking to move him outside, possibly the defensive end. Either way, he's going to make this team. He's going to be in a backup capacity. He's going to be a rotational guy, someone they look to have rotating in and out with the starters, and just to give them more depth along their defensive line. You move on to their 5th round selection, Corey Toomer, linebacker out of Idaho. Don't know if he's going to make the roster or not. If he does, it'll be off of his special teams ability. I don't think he's someone that they're looking to come in and get a lot of snaps from on the defensive side of the football. If he makes this team, it's going to be because of special teams. I don't see him making this team just off of his ability to play the linebacker position. 6th round selections. The cornerback Jeremy Lane out of Northwestern State and Winston Guy, a safety out of Kentucky. The cornerback Lane, out of Northwestern State, is an interesting prospect. They like his size. They like his ability to move and get around and be around the football. Again, that secondary is really good. And so their backups are solid. You still got Marcus Trufant hanging around. You got guys back there. So him being able to crack that starting lineup, that secondary, that rotation, even to get into a dime or a quarter package is going to be tough. If he makes this team, again, it's going to be on special teams. He's going to have to show the coaching staff, however, that he can play corner and be able to help them in a pinch if someone were to go down and he needs to step in a dime or quarter package. He would have to be able to show them that he can do that. And so going to be tough for Jeremy Lane to make this team. You look at Winston Guy. He's a safety that's very versatile. He's played a lot in the box. He's a guy that likes to be around the line of scrimmage, physical, can make tackles. I don't know about his pass coverage, though. I'm not really sold on his ability to play out in space and play receivers and tight ends in man coverage. But he's a great guy. At Kentucky, he was almost like a linebacker because he was always around the line of scrimmage. So if they can find ways to get him in the game and show his physicality in the box, he'll be an asset to the Seattle Seahawks. But if they're looking for him to be out in space and be versatile, to be able to run around and eat up space in that secondary and make plays on the football, they might be barking up the wrong tree with Winston Guy. So, again, if they are looking for someone to come in and help in the box as a backup for depth, Winston Guy is your guy. But if you're looking for someone that can do both, you're going to have to work with him. You'll have to probably put him on your practice squad, or you'll just have to let him sit and learn in practice. But you can't put him on the field yet. He's not ready in pass coverage. Going to the 7th round pick, we talked about J.R. Sweezy. Sweezy, a defensive end out of NC State that's converted to guard. Amazing enough, he started already 2 preseason games and actually looked pretty solid. And so, will he start game 1? Highly unlikely. But just the fact that he's already got 2 starts under his belt speaks volumes to his growth at the guard position in such a limited amount of time. That is an amazing feat when you think about what he's been able to do in such a limited amount of time. They also had another pick in the 7th round, Greg Scruggs, a defensive end out of Louisville. He's not playing guard. He is actually playing defensive end, and he has absolutely 0 shot of making his football team. So as we move on to the experiment, I titled this one, Hawks Spreading Their Wings. And this Seahawks team, they're starting to grow. But again, when you don't have a quarterback and your quarterback situation is a little muddled, it's hard for you to grow as an organization, as a team. The quarterback is the foundation of any building block for any franchise. You don't have a QB, you don't have a winning program. Simple as that. And so the Seahawks are beginning to spread their wings. They have a lot of talent. I've spoken to you about the secondary. We've talked about beast mode. We've talked about some of these other positions that they have, guys that are talented. They have talent on this roster. However, without your quarterback situation being under control, you're going to find yourself behind the 8 ball a lot of times, because the quarterback position is so important, and having stability there is very key if you're trying to build something that is going to have some sort of substance behind it. But they're starting to spread their wings, these Seahawks are, and they're looking to fly into the playoffs. But in order to do that, they have to find out who their quarterback is, who's going to lead them to the playoffs. And with that, we go to the research question. Who is the starting quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks in 2012? And can he help get this offense on track to complement a playoff-ready defense? It's really simple. Whoever the quarterback is, and they need to figure this out here shortly, and I think after this third preseason game, a lot of clarity will be shed on this situation. But whoever the quarterback is, the offensive line is going to have to protect, and he needs to come in and he needs to lead this team on and off the field and stabilize this quarterback position. The Seahawks have been very skittish at the quarterback position for a number of years now, since Matt Hasselbeck. He's been the last stable quarterback that they've had. But even in his last few years in Seattle, you couldn't count on him to play a full season. He had back issues, shoulder issues. He was missing games. And so they really haven't had a guy that they can rely on and call their starting quarterback week in and week out for a while now. And so whoever they decide to go with, they need to stick with this guy and ride him all the way through. Hypothesis. If the Seahawks decide on the right quarterback and get immediate production out of him and the offense as a whole, with the continued ascension from the defense, then the Seattle Seahawks could be coming into a playoff bracket near you. It's possible. The Seahawks, again, when they're clicking on all cylinders, they are a dangerous team. Go ask the Philadelphia Eagles last year. They went to Seattle at the end of the season last year, and the Eagles were playing good football towards the end of the season. They went to Seattle and got thrashed. The beast mode went off on them, and the defense played good football, and they beat the Philadelphia Eagles up pretty good toward the end of the season last year. This is what this Seattle Seahawks team can do. When they're playing good football, they are a dangerous team. They're scary, and they're hard to deal with, especially with the defense playing the way that they did last year. And so if they can get these pieces to fit into the puzzle and get guys to buy into what Pete Carroll is selling and get everybody on the same page, this is going to be a formidable team that could make playoffs. Materials needed. Put the bread aside and just eat. All right, and what I mean by that is put the bread aside, put the money aside, and just eat. Just put the best player in the game. I have no doubts in my mind that Pete Carroll will do just that. He will put the bread aside and just eat. He won't worry about who's getting paid the most money, whose money says that they're supposed to be the starter, as a lot of franchises do, a la Arizona Cardinals. I'm talking to you. He's going to put that aside and just put the best player on the field at the quarterback position and let them play football. And whoever that is, if it's Matt Flynn, fine, put him on the field. But if it's Russell Wilson, your third round rookie, who's 5'10", who no one thought could play in the NFL, if it is him, put him on the field and cut him loose. And I have no doubts in my mind, if Russell Wilson plays well against the Kansas City Chiefs this week, that he might get a shot. Pete's going to consider it at worst. He's going to consider starting Russell Wilson game 1. And so that's all I mean by put the bread aside and just eat. Moving on. Beast mode. Simple as that. They need Marshawn Lynch to come back, whatever the suspension is, 1, 2, 4 games. They need him to come back, and they need him to come back as an absolute beast. They need him to come back and play like he did last year in stretches. He was one of the best backs in the league in stretches. He was breaking tackles, bouncing off of people. You never knew when the play was over with Marshawn Lynch in 2011 because he would go in a pile, keep his legs moving, keep the leg drive, lower the pads, and just when the referee's about to blow the whistle, he'd come bursting out of the other side of that pack and make another guy miss and score a touchdown. It was amazing to watch him play football last year and his physical style of football. He was punishing defenders, bouncing off of defenders, and making things happen. They need Marshawn Lynch to enter the 2012 season in beast mode. All is well. And anytime Pete Carroll is your head coach, everything is going to be all right. Or at least that's the way Pete has painted the picture. He's a happy-go-lucky, rah-rah type of guy. He's going to always be uplifting the spirits of his players. He's always going to be optimistic. And you got to love that about Pete Carroll because that's a different approach than most head coaches in the National Football League. You know, he's not going to be, a pessimistic guy. He's going to be optimistic and he's going to be uplifting the spirits of his players, and he's going to be singing and dancing and doing all kinds of unconventional things. His nature is unorthodox when talking about NFL head coaches, but it works for him. And so if you're the Seattle Seahawks, if you're a player on that roster, all is well because Pete Carroll is your coach. Moving on. Offense, get it together. And whoever the quarterback is, it starts with the quarterback. It starts with the offensive line. These are the first two pieces that need to be in order for the offense to be functional at all. At its core, the offensive line has to be functioning at a level that is higher than the rest of the offense, because if the offensive line is not producing, you won't have time to throw, you won't have lanes to run, you won't be able to perform as an offense. So at its core, the offensive line is the most important part of your offense. And so for this offense to get it together, the offensive line can't give up 50 sacks. The quarterback has to be able to go through his progressions and make the right decision. And whoever the quarterback is, they need to come in and they need to help this offensive line out. Don't run into sacks. Don't hold on to the football any longer than you need to. A lot of what you do in the NFL is mental. Anytime your offensive lineman and your quarterback get sacked and it wasn't your fault, even though it wasn't your fault as an offensive line, you still will get the blame because the stats say that you gave up 4 sacks in that game. 3 of them might not have been your fault. 3 of them might have been the quarterback holding on to the ball entirely too long. But no one's going to remember that. All they're going to say is this offensive line gave up 4 sacks. And so mentally it plays with you. And so quarterbacks have to be able to go through their reads, make decisive decisions, and help the offensive line out. Defense, stay strong. And look, when your defense that is holding the team together, the defense for the Seahawks was essentially the glue that was holding this team together. When you are the sole provider for your team, it's tough. Mentally, it's tough to go out every game and know that if you don't do your job, you don't stand a chance of winning. On certain teams, you can come out as a defense and not have your best game, but still have a chance to win because your offense can pick you up. That wasn't the case with the Seattle Seahawks in the 2011 season. If the defense decided they were going to take a game off, then the Seahawks had absolutely no shot at winning that particular football game. And so the defense must stay strong, continue to grow, get better, and not worry about what is going on the offensive side of the ball. Just continue to do your job, continue to be a strong defense. And at the end of the day, if you do your job and continue to be a top 10 defense, you will find yourself in a lot of football games. No matter if the offense is performing or not, you're going to give yourself a chance to win. So defense, stay strong. Secondary, strive for greatness. And look, this secondary can be good. Again, you don't see big corners in this league anymore. And so having big, long, rangy corners who can make plays on the football. I saw Richard Sherman get a pick last week against Tennessee. He was with the receiver step for step, looked back, found the ball, located it, made a play on it, picked it off. It was a thing of beauty. And to see that from a 6'3 guy, and then across from him, Brandon Browner, 6'4, Cam Chancellor back there at 6'3. You still got Earl Thomas, who's not 6'3, only 5'11, but he's making plays as well. His secondary can be great. And again, they're all young, all 4 or 5 years or less of service in the National Football League. And so you got to think, if these guys stay together, sky's the limit. They could be one of the best secondaries in all of football. So I tell you this, strive for greatness. Moving on to data. Hawks QBs. I don't know who's going to start. Chances are more than one QB is going to start for the Seattle Seahawks in 2012 season. I may be wrong. It could be just Matt Flynn. It could be just Russell Wilson. But I doubt it. I think that whoever gets the starting job at some point, someone else is going to have to start, whether it be because of injury or just because of a change needs to be made at quarterback because of a lack of production. Whatever the case may be, I have Hawks quarterbacks. 3,600 passing yards, 22 to 25 touchdown passes, 13 to 17 interceptions, 58.9% completion percentage. Marshawn Lynch, 230 to 260 carries, 1,075 to 1,120 rushing yards, 8 to 10 touchdowns. Him missing the first few games is going to take some of his carries away. It's going to bring his yardage total down, but not by much. He's going to miss the first couple of games. I have no doubt in my mind Raj is going to reach out and touch him with those long arms of the law and sit him down for a few games for that DUI. Robert Turbin, he's going to have to step up in Beast Mode's absence and give the Seahawks some quality production. And even once he comes back, they're still going to need him to spell him and give him a breather and be productive while he's in the game. 130 to 170 carries, 785 to 865 yards rushing, 4 to 6 touchdowns. Hawks tight ends, and they have a plethora of them. I forgot that Kellen Winslow Jr. was on that roster. He snuck over there. They traded him, and I totally forgot that they traded for him with Tampa. And so I just realized that he was on the roster. And, they still have Zach Miller, who, he underperformed in the 2011 season. And they're going to find out that in Oakland, he was option 1, 2, and 3. And so he's got a little bit of mileage on that head of his. He's gotten a few concussions under his belt. He's gotten his bell rung a few times because Jason Campbell didn't realize that there were 2 linebackers standing right next to him and got the man crushed and got him a concussion. And so Seahawks are finding out quickly that you might not get a full season out of Zach Miller. You might not get 10 games out of him. And I think that's why they went out and got Kellen Winslow. Because, you need to have more than one tight end in this league, of course, but They don't know if they can count on him for production or not. But Hawks tight ends, 83 to 88 catches, 960 to 1,025 receiving yards, 6 to 9 touchdowns. If both of these guys are healthy, they could be one of the better tight end tandems in the league. These guys can catch the football and make things happen after they catch the football. So if they stay healthy, and that's the issue for both of them. Both of them are guys who can get hurt. They can stay healthy. Seahawks will have a couple tight ends to throw the football to. Seahawks D. Forced 29 to 33 turnovers, 35 to 40 sacks, 18.9 points a game given up, and 7 to 9 plays of 40 yards or more allowed. Look, we move on to the independent variable, and look, the Seahawks have to get this quarterback situation under control. This team has talent. They have the ability to win and get into the playoffs right now. But they got to find a quarterback that can lead them there. And so this is something that they have to figure out. And again, this defense has been doing its part to help this offense move along at its own pace. But at some point, this offense has to come along, and the quarterback position is really that, and the offensive line are what's holding it back. And so this team has to be better at the quarterback position. They have to figure it out so that this offense can get on board with what the defense is doing. And you take that and you move on to your dependent variable. If they find a quarterback of substance, someone that can come in and be good and consistently be good for the Seattle Seahawks, that does a lot for your offense. It does a lot for your defense. It does a lot for your football team as a whole. What it does for the offense is it takes a player out of the box. If the quarterback can make plays through the passing game, and now they can't focus in on beast mode. Now they have to take that defender out and look to help over the top on Braylon Edwards, over the top on Golden Tate, over the top on Doug Baldwin. They have to look to stop these guys from getting down the field and getting yards after the catch. It helps that free up the running game, but also what it does is it helps dictate tempo. At that point, now you can control the game with the running game, with the passing game, put more points on the board, which allows your defense to now play aggressively with the lead instead of from behind or in a tie ball game playing not to lose, but instead playing to win now because they have a lead and they're trying to secure that lead instead of trying to not lose the game and just keep the team in the game. And so it's a difference between playing from behind or tied as opposed to playing with the lead. And I know this Seahawks defense would look forward to the challenge of playing with the lead more consistently. And if they get a quarterback, that may be the case in 2012. You move on to the constant. And for the Seahawks, it's the 12th man. And their stadium, their fans, and the extra noise that they generate, it's something that's been there with the Seahawks since the start of the stadium being built, when it was the Seattle Stadium. It was Seahawks Stadium initially in 1997 when they first started to build it. And it transformed into Quest Field and into CenturyLink. And look, they get results. Look, it can be the fans, it can be the extra noise, whatever the case may be. They get results. They got 111 false start penalties, most in the league. The next closest is the Mall of America Stadium in Minnesota with 99. So they got a lengthy lead on everyone else in the league. They get false start penalties, and that helps. You take a 3rd and 3 and turn it into 3rd and 8. That's the difference between you getting off the field and possibly giving up a first down. So false starts are big, and they've gotten 111 since 2005. The 12th man has been a constant for the Seattle Seahawks. You move on to the conclusion, and the Seattle Seahawks team is a team that could potentially be on the rise. Again, it's all hinged upon the quarterback position. But This is a team with a lot of talent. I'm trying to tell you that they have pieces out here that if you had a chance to pick off their roster, their roster would look pretty bare when you were done. They got some players that you would like to take and put on your team and would benefit from doing so. This Seattle Seahawks team, they have a dilemma on their hands. And what they need to do essentially is find out who their quarterback is, stick him in the game, and no matter what happens, no matter what the circumstance is, barring injury, don't take him out. If you go 2-14 with this guy, go 2-14 with him. But you need to find a quarterback, stay with that quarterback, and through thick and thin, ride with this quarterback. See what he can do. Look, if this is your rookie, Russell Wilson, he's going to make mistakes because he is a rookie. But don't yank him out of the game. Let him learn from his mistakes. If it's Matt Flynn, again, another guy who's never really been a starter in this league, he's going to make mistakes. But if it's Matt Flynn, let him make his mistakes. Let the team grow with whoever you put at quarterback. This team can win now, but I just can't see them winning until they get this quarterback situation under control. And so, with that being said, I have them going 6-10 this year. You can't have the uncertainty that they have at the quarterback position and think that everything's going to be fine. It's not. You have to figure out who your quarterback is, make a decision, and stick with it. And I haven't seen that from the Seahawks yet. And I don't know if you're going to see that from them in 2012. And thus, they end up with a 6-10 mark. They could easily be an 8-8, 9-17. If they get this quarterback thing correct and this guy comes in and plays good football, this offensive line blocks, we could be looking at a 9-17. But until you show me that on the field, I got to go with what I see, and I see a 6-10 football team. And that'll do it for the Seattle Seahawks. On the other side of this break, after the lab quiz, we'll be back and we'll be talking St. Louis Rams. See you in a bit.
Lab quiz. Lab quiz.
All right, you're back in the lab room, and as you come back, I present to you the St. Louis Rams. Now, hold on. Don't go anywhere. Don't leave, okay? The Rams are a team in the National Football League. Show some respect. Stick around. Check the Rams out. They got a new head coach, Jeff Fisher. They're trying to establish themselves as a relevant team in the league. So give them a chance. Don't just say it's the Rams and run away. Okay? Now, I said that, and I still say this. The Rams are a team that don't have two things that match. They're like the team that gets invited to a steak dinner, a fancy steak dinner, and shows up with plastic utensils. They're the team that has a bottle of 1968 Chateau de Brion and no corkscrew. They don't have parts that match. They got a quarterback in Sam Bradford that can play the quarterback position. No offensive line. They got a running back in Steven Jackson who can run the football. No offensive line. Again, you talk Sam Bradford, who's he throwing the football to? No receivers. It's a tough thing. You got Chris Long, defensive end, playing out of his mind. You got James Laurinaitis playing some really good football quietly at that middle linebacker position for the Rams. No secondary. They don't have two things that match. They got peanut butter. They have no jelly. And so the Rams, Jeff Fisher, his first objective, his first goal as the coach of the Rams was to get talent onto this roster to get pieces to fill in all of these holes. If you were Jeff Fisher coming in, you had to be overwhelmed by the lack of talent and the amount of holes on this roster. It was like trying to plug a dike. You put a piece here, and you put another piece here, and you put another piece here, and then you put another piece here. But you plug this hole, and then you got to plug another hole over here, and you start running out of fingers after a while. You can't plug with so many holes at a time, and so it's going to take time for this Rams roster to fill out and start to take shape the way that he wants. But he's doing it the right way. He's drafting players, keeping the ones on the roster that are of any good, and he's going to utilize them. Of course, Steven Jackson, your workhorse running back, Sam Bradford, your franchise QB, Danny Amendola, a very shifty, productive wide receiver. They've got pieces on the offensive side of the football, but it's limited. Their pieces are limited all around the team. On defense, they have Chris Long. They have James Laurinaitis, Quentin Michael, when healthy and playing good football at safety. But that's where it essentially ends for them as far as talent is concerned. Those 5 players, maybe 6 that I named, maybe omitting 1 or 2, are players that are of any good on the Saints. on the Rams roster. After that, you'd be hard pressed to find a lot of talent on that roster. And so we go to the strengths, and it's only one strength. The offense was really bad in a lot of facets of their game. They weren't really good at all on offense, except for in one area, and that was the run game. And the reason why they were good in the run game was because of Steven Jackson. And he's their one and only strength on his team right now, is Steven Jackson. He's someone that, you can turn around and hand the ball just like a Frank Gore. Even when the chips are down, you can turn around, hand the ball off to Steven Jackson, and know that he's going to give you everything that he has. And it's a comfort to have 39 in the backfield and see the dreads swinging and see him jump stepping and jump cutting and running people over, stiff arming guys and getting extra yards. He's a joy to watch. And since his rookie campaign, where he only gained 643 yards rushing, 673 yards rushing, Steven Jackson has went over 1,000 yards every season thereafter. And that puts him in the likes of the Barry Sanders in terms of consecutive 1,000-yard rushing seasons. And it's funny because I was, again, just like with Frank Gore, I assumed that Steven Jackson missed a lot of games with nagging injuries. But he doesn't. I looked at his numbers. I looked at the stats, and the stats say he's playing 12, 13 games a season. And that's a lot for a running back, because a running back probably takes the most pounding of any player on the field in a given game. And so it's a reason why the shelf life of a running back is a lot less than any other player, especially the skill players on the field, because they take a pounding, they take up the punishment on every single snap, whether they're blocking someone or they're carrying out a fake and getting smashed, or they're running a football. Even if they're in pass protection, it's still contact. And you can't say that about a receiver. Even when they're blocking, it might not be that physical of a job to block a DB on a play or run somebody off on a route. You're not engaging in physical contact like a running back. And Steven Jackson is a physical back. And him going over 1,000 yards, he's not just creeping over 1,000. We're talking 11, 12, 1,400 yards rushing in these seasons. And so Steven Jackson is an elite back in this league. And I'm hoping he gets a chance to play in the playoffs, because you'd hate to see a guy of his stature never get a chance to play for a winner. And so let's hope Steven Jackson, they get to figure this thing out before his career comes to an end. Weaknesses. St. Louis Rams weaknesses. All right, look. Let's just run over these quickly. It's so many. I don't want to spend a lot of time on them. Let's just run over these quickly. I'm going to list them, and we'll just move on. Okay. Gave up 25.4 points per game. That was 25th in the league. 31st rated rush defense. So only one team was worse than them in giving up rushing yards. Forced only 18 turnovers on defense. You got to force more than 18 turnovers. They forced 9 fumbles, 9 interceptions. That was it. And when you're not a good offensive football team, as the Saints were, as the Rams were not in 2011, you need to get shorter fields for your offense to help them score points. They need all the help they can get. The defense was not in a helping mood. They were not willing to lend a helping hand to the Rams offense. And so they got to get more turnovers than 18. That's not a big number in the National Football League. Only scored a measly 12.1 points a game. Do you know how hard that is to do? And of course, that was dead last in the National Football League in 2011. Do you know how hard it is to only score 12 points a game? Do you realize that is less than a touchdown and 2 field goals? You're not scoring 2 full touchdowns in a game. What you're scoring to, what that amounts to, is a touchdown, a field goal, and a safety. 31st in total offense. Again, only one team was worse than them in offense. 30th in pass offense. Again, only 2 teams were worse than them in pass offense. Only team in 2011 not to make it to double-digit touchdowns thrown. They had 9 touchdowns thrown as a team. Again, do you realize how hard it is to not have 10 touchdowns thrown by your team as a whole in a whole entire 16-game season? Throwing 1 touchdown a game will get you 16. Gave up 55 sacks last season. Worst in all of football. Rams weaknesses. Let's go on to camp battles. The Rams were supposed to have several camp battles materialize. And for one reason or another, they just didn't. The first one was at left guard between Quinn Okajanaka and rookie 5th round selection Rokavikius Watkins. Now, they call him Rock for obvious reasons. His first name is not the easiest to say. Watkins showed up out of shape and overweight. So, by default, Quinn Okajanaka was given the offensive left guard starting position. He was probably going to get it anyway because Watkins would have been a rookie, and it's just hard for rookies to come in and start. But still, you being a 5th round selection, you're not guaranteed a roster spot. Why would you come into camp overweight and out of shape? Don't get it. Anyway, moving on to safety. Craig Dahl was part of a safety group that saw a lot of safeties get in and get starting time last year. And Craig Dahl was one of these safeties. He's a good safety in the box. He's a good special teamer. He's terrible in pass defense. So they're looking to upgrade, which they did. And Darian Stewart, he started a bit at the end of the season. They felt like, hey, this is an upgrade from Dahl. And so they put Darian Stewart in. They go back to the 2012 season, new coaching staff, and they need to find out all over again that Craig Dahl sucks in pass defense. So they put him back in with the starters. So we'll see how that turns out. Good luck there. You'll probably be turning to one of your rookies or to Darian Stewart again because Craig Dahl can't play pass defense. Then you look at the receiver position. They have a couple of receivers that they brought in the offseason, a couple of receivers that they drafted. The receiver position was a glaring weakness for the Rams in 2011. Could have added that in the weakness category, but really, did I need to do that? The receiver core last year, after losing Danny Amendola, was essentially non-existent. They had Brandon Lloyd, but Brandon Lloyd without a quarterback is like having a center at wide receiver. It's pointless. So, Brandon Lloyd left, went to the Patriots in the offseason. Danny Amendola is healthy after having a shoulder/elbow injury in his season early last year. He's a dangerous receiver, but they had nothing else. And look, I like Denario Alexander, but he has chronic knee problems that's probably going to end his career early. The Rams know this, and so they have been making preparations to replace him in the event that he can't go. He's always hurt. His knees, he has a degenerative condition in his knees that is going to end his career early probably. He has talent. He can jump. He's big. He's athletic. He makes plays on the football. I like Denario Alexander, and so do the Rams. So they're willing to keep him on the roster and put up with his knee issues because his upside is so great. But still, they had to do some work in the offseason. They drafted wide receiver Brian Quick in the second round. Also drafted Chris Givens, wide receiver out of Wake Forest. So they were busy drafting receivers. They did the same thing last year. They drafted wide receiver Greg Salas. They drafted receiver Austin Pettis. And so this wide receiving corps is starting to take shape. They also went in the offseason and acquired ex-Pro Bowl receiver Steve Smith from the Eagles last year in free agency. And so they have a formidable group now with Smith and Amendola out wide, but you need other guys to step up behind him. You really don't know who's going to play where. So you have that mix between Salas, Pettis. You can even throw Brandon Gibson in the mix. Of course, your rookies Quick and Givens. And then don't forget about Denario Alexander. So it's a lot of moving parts behind Amendola and Smith. You have to stay tuned to figure out who's going to play where, who's going to make the roster, and who is going to get their pink slip. Moving on to the rookie watch. The Rams were bad in a lot of areas. I don't have to tell you that. You already know that. They were a 2-14 team last year. When you are 2-14, you're not good at almost anything. There might be one or two things that you're good at, but you're not going to excel in many areas. So the Rams had a lot of work to do, and their first round selection was the defensive tackle / defensive end Michael Brockers, who's probably going to play defensive tackle for them. This is a defensive tackle out of LSU that they feel like is a gem. They're going to plug him in day one, the one technique, and ask him to go in and create havoc in the run game, stop plays in the backfield, stop runs for no gain, and get after the quarterback. And he can do all of that and then some. They went out and got Kendall Langford from the Dolphins. He's going to play the 3 technique. Together, they're hoping that those two in the middle will hold serve and help create mismatches outside for Chris Long, one-on-one, to help him get more sacks and to help them stop teams from running the ball down their throat. You look at their second-round selections. Talked about Brian Quick, the receiver out of Appalachian State. This is a raw, big, long, rangy receiver with sneaky speed that, if given the opportunity, can make plays. He's got a lot of learning to do. He hasn't been a receiver for a very long time. He's an ex-basketball player. But they like what they saw so much, and rightfully so. He made some big plays. He was a part of that Appalachian State team that beat Michigan in the big house. So they can play. He can play football. He can get it done. He just has to get stronger and learn how to get off of the line and beat jams and get into his routes and be a better route runner. But he's got good hands. He's very fluid and can catch the football. I like Brian Quick. I just don't know if I like him as a second-round selection. We'll see. The second-round selection was cornerback Janoris Jenkins out of North Alabama. And look, this guy was a stud at Florida. He couldn't stop smoking weed, and he got suspended, and finally they had enough, got fed up, and threw him off of the team at Florida. So he transferred to North Alabama and finished out his career there. He's got first-round talent written all over him. He just couldn't stay out of trouble. But again, when you're a bad team, I've spoke about this at great lengths when talking about the Cleveland Browns, you have to take chances on guys who don't have the best background off the field. Get them to buy into your program and get them to play football for you on the field and be rewarded with what they can bring on the football field. And you worry about the off the field stuff when they get there. He's a guy, has immense talent, can start for you day one at corner, which he will, across from Cortland Finnegan, another guy that they brought in free agency. Jeff Fisher knows all too well. He coached him for every year except one in Cortland Finnegan's career in Tennessee, and he brought him over in free agency. So he's going to go across from Cortland Finnegan, and Janoris Jenkins is going to start day one. And I'm telling you what, he's a solid corner. And I think he could be special in this league if he keeps his head straight and plays football and worries about football instead of all the off-field stuff. Third round selection, cornerback Trumaine Johnson out of Montana. And this was a guy that was climbing up draft boards up until the combine when he ran that 4.5, 4.6 type speed and showed guys, I might not be that guy you thought I was in terms of speed. He's a big corner. He's 6'1". He's very physical. I'm thinking he's going to end up playing safety in the National Football League because he has all the skills. He's physical. He tackles. He can run and move. But with the 4.5, 4.6, 40, you're not keeping up with receivers in this league on a consistent basis. So I think his skill set, his size, translates better to the safety position. But I like Trumaine Johnson a lot. I like his skills. I like what he brings to the table. He played at Montana, so you ask yourself, has he played against proven talent, grade A talent? Maybe not. But look, skills are skills, whether you're playing against Division 2A, Division 1A, whoever. If you have the requisite skills necessary, it can translate. You just need to be coached up, and you just need to see the game for what it is and the speed and be able to adjust. I don't see Trumaine Johnson having a problem with that. They like him. They like what he's done so far in camp. He's got his hand on a lot of balls throughout the preseason. Look for Trumaine Johnson to be at corner and possibly at safety in the 2012 season. Fourth round selection, Chris Givens. This is a speedster from Wake Forest. They need help at receiver. I've talked to you about that already. Chris Givens can give them the help that they need at the receiver position. He has to get stronger, though. He's a guy that can catch the football, can make something happen after he catches the football. Very fast, can give you some deep ball action. But he's got to get stronger. Again, he's one of these guys that can be redirected off the line of scrimmage. His route can be disrupted because he's not the strongest at the line of scrimmage. And so if he can get stronger, get better at running routes, Chris Givens can be an asset for the St. Louis Rams. Fifth round selection. We spoke about him already. Rokavikius Watkins, tackle out of South Carolina. And they were going to try him at guard because he's a plotter. He's a guy that is not overly athletic. He's a big man. And so at tackle, you need to be light on your feet. You need to be agile. Watkins is not any of those things. He's a big man who, when he gets his hands on you, can do serious damage, but he's not going to wow you with his athleticism. Thus, you kick those type of guys inside where there's not a lot of space, where they don't have a lot of ground to cover, where they're more likely to be able to get their hands on the defensive lineman. And Watkins could excel there, but again, he showed up overweight and out of shape. And so he's hindered his progress already by not coming into camp ready to play. He could not make the roster because of that. But again, the Rams are a team that is in such need of talent. They can't afford to just cut guys loose just because they showed up out of shape and overweight. Work with them, get him into shape, get him to where he needs to be a productive player for you on the field, and see what you can get out of this guy, because I think there's some value there. Sixth round selection, kicker Greg Zuerlein. And look, they drafted him, and anytime, I said it before, I say it again, you hear me say it all the time, you draft a specialist, because you can get specialists undrafted, you can get them off the waiver wire. You don't need to draft one if it's not important, but if you see someone you like and feel like they're a difference maker, and you spend a draft pick on them, they're going to make the roster because you believe in them. And Greg Zuerlein is no different. He's the kicker out of Missouri Western, and they like him. He's already made 2 kicks, of over 50 yards already. And so you look at this kicker, I think he's going to be a good one for them. And they've had a lot of good kickers come through St. Louis, and the last being Josh Brown that they could rely on. And so let's see if Greg Zuerlein is another kicker that can come in and produce for the St. Louis Rams. 7th round selection. I like this guy a lot. Daryl Richardson, running back out of Abilene Christian. Don't be surprised if you see a lot more Daryl Richardson. The Rams, and I skipped over one of their 2nd round picks. Excuse me. They had 3 2nd round picks. I told you about Brian Quick, receiver out of Appalachian State. I told you about Janoris Jenkins, the corner out of North Alabama. I did not tell you about Isaiah Peed, the running back out of Cincinnati, who they look to spell Steven Jackson with. And I think this is a great move because you need to prolong Steven Jackson's career. You want Steven Jackson to be around. He's such an asset to you. He's such a strength for your football team. He's the face of your franchise. Of course, not adding in Sam Bradford. But you talk St. Louis Rams, the first thing that pops to your mind is Steven Jackson. And so you want to keep him around for a while. You want to have his production be there when you need it, when you're actually trying to turn the corner. And the best way to do that is to have guys take a little bit of the pressure off, take some of the workload off of his plate. Isaiah Peed was drafted with that particular idea in mind. And so Isaiah Peed is going to back up Steven Jackson. Also look for Daryl Washington, though, the 7th-round pick out of Abilene Christian, to be someone that can spell him as well. I like him. I like his versatility. I like what he does. He's a tough guy. He's not really big, but he's always falling forward. He's decisive, and at times Isaiah P can be indecisive in what he wants to do. He's a guy that doesn't hit the hole necessarily as hard as you would like him to. He does a little bit of dancing when there's 3 or 4 yards to be got, and him stutter stepping and waiting for something to develop that's not there oftentimes ends in no gain or a 1-yard gain when there were 3 or 4, maybe 5 yards to be gained on the play. So Daryl Richardson is the direct opposite. He's a downhill runner, a guy that's going to get the 3 yards if they are there, and he's looking to fall forward. Keeps a low pad level, and he's looking, if it's 3 yards, he might get 4 because he's falling forward and running with a low pad level and keeping his shoulders square. And so I like this guy a lot. I expect him to make the team and to be productive for the Rams in 2012. And with that, we move on to the experiment. And I titled this experiment Rock Bottom Rams. And the Rams essentially hit rock bottom last year. And it seemed like we said that 3 years ago when they hired Steve Spagnuolo to be their head coach. But they hit rock bottom again, and I think they actually bottomed out this time. There was no search this time that involved young, hot assistants or coordinators. They went for a proven commodity in Jeff Fisher, and it was because they hit rock bottom this time. They couldn't get any lower than they did. I mean, you had people questioning whether Sam Bradford was the answer as a franchise quarterback, and you invested so much money in him because the rookie wage scale had not taken effect yet. And so you had people question whether Sam Bradford was the guy. And there should be no question about that because he's not being adequately protected, and he has no weapons to throw the football to. And so it was starting to turn ugly in St. Louis, and they had to do something. And so they went and got Jeff Fisher to clean this mess up. And so that's why this is titled Rock Bottom Rams. And we move on to the research question, and it reads as such. Will the presence of Jeff Fisher on this revamped roster be enough to rejuvenate the St. Louis Rams franchise? Again, Jeff Fisher is the man for the job if you're looking for someone to come in and turn this thing around. He's done it before. The Tennessee Titans, when they were the Houston Oilers and they were the doormat in the NFL, he came in, turned that franchise around, and he can do the same for the Rams. Just give him some time, give him some space, give him some tools, and he'll get the job done. Hypothesis. If the offensive line can provide some holes for Steven Jackson, keep Sam Bradford upright, and the defense begins to show some semblance of life, and the team as a whole continues to buy into Jeff Fisher's philosophy, then the St. Louis Rams can begin their climb out of NFL obscurity. And so you look, all these things need to happen for them to achieve any level of success in 2012. And their level of success is different than a lot of teams in the league. If they win 6 games this year, that's a success for them. If they win 5 games, that's a success for them. For most teams, that's a terrible season. But when you won 2 games, you're a new franchise, a lot of moving parts, a lot of turnover on this roster. It takes time to gel. It takes time to learn a new philosophy, a new scheme. So winning 5, 6, maybe 7 games, that's a big step in the right direction for the Rams if they could do so. I don't see it happening, but look, any step in the right direction is a great step if you're the Rams. Materials needed. No more badly beaten Bradford. I felt bad for Sam Bradford last year. The Redskins played the Rams last year. We destroyed Sam Bradford. We sacked him 5 or 6 times, forced fumbles, and And he made enough plays in that game to beat us. You had Lance Kendricks dropping passes left and right. You had Mike Sims Walker dropping touchdown passes left and right. They should have beat us last year, but they couldn't because they weren't a good football team. Bad teams find ways to lose games, and that's what they did against the Redskins last year. And I just felt bad for Sam Bradford. You ever seen someone who gets in fights all the time, or who's broken their orbital or fractured their orbital, and their eye is always black, and one eye is always closed more so than the other eye? That's what Sam Bradford. He looks scared. Like he always looks like he's flinching, like someone's about to hit him. I feel bad for him because you see Sam Bradford and he looks like a beaten man. And you see him and he's almost like, please don't. You go to shake his hand. Hey, how you doing, Sam? And it's almost like he's scared. And that's what the offensive line has done to him. They've made him a different person. He came into the league with probably the utmost confidence, feeling like a guy that can go in and get the job done immediately. And they've turned him from a guy of supreme confidence to, please don't hit me. I'll do whatever you want. I'll fall down. I'll throw it to you. Just don't hit me anymore. And he's a better quarterback than that. If they protect him, Sam Bradford showed in his rookie season. They were one game away from making the playoffs in his rookie season. And they regressed so bad from his rookie season to 2011 that they went from 7-9 to 2-14, and they did a hell of a job in doing so. They really went south in a hurry. And Sam Bradford, he paid the price probably more so than anyone else, being sacked. Of those 55 times, he probably endured about a good 40 of those sacks. And they were some shots. I mean, there was some guys that just came unblocked, and he was getting destroyed back there. If anybody should be seeing ghosts, it's definitely Sam Bradford. I feel for the man. Let's hope there's no more badly beaten Bradford. Lights, camera, Jackson. Let's see Steven get off and have a great season and have this translate to wins. Steven Jackson is one of the best backs in all of football. He's a physical specimen. I love the fact. I hate that he ended up in St. Louis, almost like a Corey Dillon. He's probably never going to get out. Corey Dillon did. I don't think Steven will. But I look at it like this. He could have ended up on the Cowboys. To think they had every opportunity to choose him, and they decided to pick Julius Jones. Good job, Cowboys. Thank you for not making life in the NFC East that much harder for all the teams in that division. Steven Jackson is a monster. Like I said, I love watching the man play football. And when he's on the field, it's lights, camera, Jackson. Let's see that happen in 2012. And maybe he can help them win more games than they're supposed to. O-line, rise and shine. You guys have to wake the hell up. You can't give up 55 sacks in a season. All of them probably weren't your fault, but in some shape, way, or form, it was your fault. Even if the quarterback held on to the ball too long, he probably held on to the ball too long because you let him get hit 2 plays ago, and it hurt a lot. And now he's thinking about another defensive end or defensive tackle bearing down on him. And instead of him making his reads, he's worrying about the pass rush. And so he held on to the ball longer than he should and took a sack. You have to be better, offensive line. And I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know how you're going to get better, but you need to get better. When you make selections like Jason Smith, second overall draft pick, you end up with offensive lines that give up 55 sacks. I don't know what you're going to do. Figure it out. O-line, rise and shine. Time to wake up. Open your eyes. Block somebody. Wake up, defense. And this goes to the theme of rise and shine on the offensive line. Defense, wake the hell up. You got Chris Long out there. You added a piece in Michael Brockers. You added Kendall Langford. You got Robert Quinn at the defensive end. He can get after the quarterback. You got James Laurinaitis at middle linebacker. You went out. You got Joe Dunbar. You went out and got Rocky McIntosh. You have a formidable linebacker group now. You got Cortland Finnegan at corner. You got Janoris Jenkins across from him. You got Quentin Michael at safe. You have parts on defense now. No excuse. Wake up. Play defense. Give your team a chance to win. Fisher fishing for talent. Jeff Fisher is looking for talent. He has an ad out that says, help wanted, talented football players needed. Anybody that's talented that can play football, Jeff Fisher would love to hear from you. This team needs to acquire as much talent as possible. I just named some players. They have people. They went in the draft. They acquired free agents. They're doing this thing the right way, but they need more talent. They need depth. And so Jeff Fisher is going to get this thing together and get it on the right track. It's going to take time, but the quickest way to do it is to acquire talent, and that is exactly what Jeff Fisher is looking to do. Moving on to data. Sam Bradford, 3,315 passing yards, 15 to 19 touchdowns, 9 to 11 interceptions, 59.6% completion percentage. Steven Jackson, want to see these carries come down, and not because you missed 2 or 3 games, but just because they have Isaiah Peed and Daryl Richardson in the backfield to help spell you a little bit. Let's see these carries come down. 245 to 270 for carries. 1,105 to 1,150 rushing yards, 6 to 9 touchdowns. Backup running backs, and we're talking both Isaiah Peed, Daryl Washington, any other backs that they may have in the mix. 180 to 210 carries, 785 to 865 rushing yards, 4 to 6 touchdowns. Danny Amendola, welcome back off of that injury. Let's see you play a whole season and get back to your form of 2010. 75 to 82 catches, 705 to 800 receiving yards, 4 to 6 touchdowns. This is who I think needs to be a more important part of this offense. I think that he has to be an integral part of this offense if they're going to succeed, and that's tight end Lance Kendricks. They drafted him last year. He looked stellar in the preseason, and then the bottom fell out when the regular season started, and he started dropping passes left and right. He needs to be more consistent and step his level of play up, because Sam Bradford needs to throw him the football, and he's a mismatch for a lot of safeties and linebackers in this league. He has to catch the football. 49 to 54 catches, 540 to 595 receiving yards, 4 to 6 touchdowns. Rams defense, you have to get better. No doubt about it. Across the board. 22 to 27 turnovers. 22, still not as many as you would like, but when you had 18, you'll take it. 38 to 43 sacks. Chris Long is going to get you 12 by himself. All right. Robert Quinn is going to get you 10 by himself, if healthy. It's 22. No reason for you not to find your way around 40. You were close, right around that range last year. I can see you getting up and getting even higher with Quinn starting and getting more snaps at defensive end this year. In the addition of Michael Brockers as well. 20.7 points a game. You guys gave up over 25 last year. you got to give up less than 3 touchdowns. If you can get it under 3 touchdowns, you'll give yourself a chance to be in ball games. 7-9 plays of 40 given up. You gave up 12 a year ago. Got to bring that down. That's way too many. Independent variable. Listen to Jeff Fisher and just get better at every aspect of football. Cut and dry. That's what you need to do if you're the Rams. Dependent variable. You listen to Jeff Fisher, get better at every aspect of football, you'll win more games in 2012. You'll be better than 2-14. Constant. Steven Jackson. I've already spoke at great lengths as to how good of a football player Steven Jackson is, what he means to the St. Louis Rams franchise, and he's been a consistent running back, the most consistent running back in the league since he entered in 2004. Since 2005, he's had 1,000 yards rushing every season, only back to be able to lay claim to that. Steven Jackson is a constant for the St. Louis Rams. All right, so that takes us to the conclusion, and the St. Louis Rams have a long road to relevancy in the National Football League. They have a long road ahead of them. It's a long trip. Everybody get in, put your seatbelts on. It's going to be a long, bumpy ride if you're the St. Louis Rams. There's good news and bad news attached to their situation, however. The good news is, on this trip that they're taking, they have the right man driving the bus in Jeff Fisher. Here's a head coach who has the experience to take them where they want to go. He can lead them if they are willing to follow. That's the good news. They have a great leader in place. The bad news is that Steven Jackson is probably not going to be along for the whole ride. Unless Jeff Fisher and Sam Bradford know some sort of shortcut, some sort of major shortcut that can launch the Rams into NFC West and NFC period relevancy, then Steven Jackson is going to have to get off of the bus at some point on this trip. He just recently turned 29 over the offseason, and there's a lot of mileage on these tires. And again, he's been in the league since 2004. He's been your workhorse. He's had 3, maybe 4 seasons of plus 320 carry seasons. And so there's a lot of mileage on these tires. Don't know how much longer he's going to be able to carry the load. Hence, they drafted these backs, but still, you don't know how much longer Steven Jackson is going to be on that bus for that trip to relevancy. And so he's going to have to get off the bus at some point. And what a sad day it will be if he retires and never gets to experience the playoffs. With his illustrious career and never having set foot in the playoffs, that will be a shame. And so let's hope that Jeff Fisher and Sam Bradford know some sort of shortcut, some sort of major shortcut to get them to be a relevant football team in time for Steven Jackson to at least play in a playoff game and hopefully even win one. I said all that to say this. I don't even believe this, but this is what my sheet says. And I don't go against my sheet. I have the Rams going 0-16. I don't believe that. I don't believe that teams are bad enough to actually not win games. Jeff Fisher coach team, Jeff Fisher himself is good for 3 wins by himself. So right there, I think the Rams are going to win 4 or 5 games. But going off the sheet and looking at their schedule, it's a tough schedule. I don't know where the wins are going to come from. They're going to beat somebody. First of all, they play in the NFC West. Okay, they're going to beat the Cardinals, or they're going to beat the Seahawks. They're going to beat somebody in that division. So right there, that stops. But see, I can't give them wins. I just can't hand them wins because they're the Rams. I don't trust them. They have to earn my trust, and right now they have zero of it. And so it's hard for me to hand over a W to them even when they're at home. And so I don't know where the wins are coming from, but they're going to win some games. But I have them going 0-16. They're going to win 3, 4, maybe 5 games, realistically. But again, I don't give teams wins. You have to show me the propensity to win games, and they haven't shown me that. So until they do that, they're an 0-16 team. And that'll do it for the Rams. That'll have us going for another touchdown. That's going to be a touchdown. Throw it up. Tack on a quick extra point. Watch these games. I can't harp on it enough. It's third week of preseason, the most important week, the dress rehearsal for a lot of these teams. Tonight on ESPN, you're getting the Arizona Cardinals and the Tennessee Titans. That's a nationally televised game, so that'll be on. Check that out. You'll also have NFL Network doing the around the preseason telecast where they're showing you live look-ins. Check that out, especially if your team is not the Arizona Cardinals or the Tennessee Titans, but you are on TV and you're not in that market. Watch the live look-ins. You'll probably see your team and see an extensive amount of action from that game, and you'll get to see what's going on if you can't watch the game yourself. And so keep your eye on this third week of preseason. That's all I have to say. It's a lot going on, and this is a very telling week of preseason football. With that said, that's going to be that extra point tacked on. It's good. And so I'm here. Hit me up in the inbox in the lab room at gmail.com. I'm on Facebook. Like me on Facebook at In the Lab Room. I'm on Twitter at In the Lab Room. That's my Twitter handle. Again, I thank you for joining me in the Lab Room. I'm your host, Lou, and I thank you for stopping by. And I look for you same time, same place. See you tomorrow.